Hello, YouTubers. Okay, so it is Tuesday, December 30th, 2025. Just talked with a man, Martin. We need to pray for Martin. I was speaking with him. He's in that truck right over there. That's his truck over there. And he had a pickup. He's over here, and I hollered at him. I said, hey, you know what Jesus' blood type is? Turns out Martin is from Kenya, and he's on his way. He's getting on a plane to go back for 50 days to go back to his family and everything like that. And I just spoke with him, had a very, very good witness, and he said that he has been getting up just slightly before or slightly after 3 o'clock every morning for a while. He was like, man, what is that? And God did that to me for a while. And then in the Bible, I think it was Elijah and Elisha. But he was waking up because somebody was calling his name. And he was like, hey, what's up? You holler at me? He's like, no, go back to bed. So it happens again. He's like, no, go back to bed. Third time, and then he dawns on it. He's like, hey, that's God hollering at you. So the next time, say, hey, I'm here. What's that? Or whatever. And so then he learned to hear the voice of God that way. Okay, so that was in my mind like instantly, bam, when this guy's talking about 3 o'clock. And I have woke up, I don't know how many times, and I was in prison, and a guy told me about, in the middle of the night, sometimes God will talk to you, always have a pen and paper handy to write it down. And directly after that, I started hearing the songs, and then I was hearing the songs in my head, and I wrote them down and everything like that. And then when I knew I was supposed to take them to church, so I was taking the songs to the churches, and that's where I was singing at the church, and that's where I met my wife and all that, you know. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be driving. If I wasn't driving, I wouldn't be handing out the Bibles and all that type of stuff, right? So this direct line of obedience we can see time and time again in the Bible or whatever. Well, as I'm talking with this guy, I remember I was in the county jail, and this old guy came in there, and he was asking me, he's like, does God talk to you? I was like, yeah. And he was trying to figure out if I was crazy or not. And that was my initial thought. But then I realized he was curious. And I said, well, man, it's kind of like, you know, you got to dial it. And that's, I told this guy right here the same thing. I said, man, you know how you're driving and you start getting out too far away, and the FM radio starts, you get to where you can't hear it no more. And then the other way, like you might be right next to the antenna, but you're just a couple numbers off, you know what I mean? So you can kind of hear the music, but it's a little staticky. You know, you might need to dial the radio in a little bit. I said, well, that's the deal. Either you're like treading on getting too far away, or you might need to dial it in. I said, but either way, Bible study is a solution, you know. So the more that you'll read the Bible and everything and get squared away, and you know, and really listen. And I was like, so when you listen to God, what do you do? He was like, you know, I was like, okay, when you go buy a brand new truck, what do you do? And he was like, oh, well, I said, well, you got like the make, the model, what type of equipment do I need? What's the maintenance schedule, the payments, fuel mileage? I mean, all kinds of stuff for just what kind of truck is this? I said, so you would come to a conclusion pretty quick. You need to write down all the categories to try to figure out which type of semi-truck I need to move this, you know. Is it a house? Is it just a regular trailer? Whatever. Over the road, day cab, working local. Lots of particulars. So it ain't something you're just going to run the numbers in your head. You're going to have to write down these categories and then figure that out, and then like go into your reliabilities, blah blah. I mean, there's a lot to equipping to be a trucker. And this dude's a trucker, so he understands that. Become all things to all men. Well, I said, so what's your strategy for talking to God? I said, well, you need to get your pen and paper out, have it handy at all times, especially at night. But you need to go through your parameters and critically think, how am I going to hear from God? How do I do that? You know what I mean? You got your Bible study. You got, talking to people that know what's up, asking advice, whatever. I've heard of meditation. How do you hear from God? And then how do I confirm? There again, go back to the Word, and I can ask God to give me the parameters. He is God. He is the Creator. And I'm like, cut me some slack. What do you want me to do? I need to establish a line of communication. How would you like for me to establish this line of communication? And then you personally write down what he tells you to do. So you're practicing your line of communication and figuring out how to communicate. And there's a lot of it's seeking. There's a willingness, and then there's a pursuit, and then there's consistency. You see what I'm saying? And you got to remember that God, I didn't tell him this, but God is always seeking best. So it's not just good, it's gooder than good. It is best. So you might be knocking it out of the box, but the box might be in a shipping container. So not only do you have to knock it out of the box, but it needs to penetrate the steel and into the yonder. And you don't even realize, you're over here, you might be a big fish in a small pond, but, there's Lake Michigan. And then you might be a little salty, so, you got the Mediterranean, you know what I mean? You're not exactly, aircraft carrier yet. Out, traipsing across the entire world. Anyways, there's different degrees, okay? And God's looking for best. So your version is not enough. You have to seek, which is the pursuit, with a willingness and with an obedience and an adherence, and you will find certain parameters where don't step over this boundary line when you read the law. You know what I mean? And that's whole world's been robbed by not reading the law once a year. You know what I mean? And just hearing it once a year, and then it'd be like, okay, this is what's up. You know what I mean? And then seeing the temporary sacrifice for sin. You know what I mean? Jesus is our eternal sacrifice. But, man, I don't think these kids would be shooting each other and stuff like that if they ever been hunting. I never could imagine growing up shooting somebody. And we went and hunted deer. We used to get on the school bus and show the bus driver, or 22 or 410, that it was clear, and he'd be like, well, where's your ammunition? Like, it's in my pocket. It's like, okay, because he didn't want you to forget to bring your ammo. And we would have the hunter safety course, and back behind the school there was a hill and some woods, and we would target practice and do a hunter safety course once a year in Peggs, Oklahoma. That's like what we did. And so, yeah, I mean, because we all hunted. You know, if you field dress a deer and bite a chunk out of the, it's still warm. So just grabbing a deer heart and it's in your hand and it's warm, and you take a bite out of it. You're not going to do that to a person, man. It's just like, you know what I mean? I don't care how mad you get and all this other kind of stuff like that, or if they're making fun of you or whatever else like that. You know, and then nowadays, you know, you got this. They're desensitized. All these, you know, medias and games and whatever, and a lot of demons out there and whatever else like that. They're shooting up the schools and stuff. If they would read the law and sacrifice an animal in front of everybody once a year, you would see an immediate turnaround, in my opinion. Anyways, that's got nothing to do with that. I didn't say that to the guy or anything else like that, but I wanted to just document this, put this on the 5-minute ministry. Probably shouldn't have went on that tangent there. Raquel, get it dialed in. You know what I mean? Get your antenna dialed in. You know, get your radio dialed, get your antenna up. You know what I mean? The safest place to be when the wolves are around and your sheep is directly next to the shepherd. Okay, so you want to get that dialed in, read the Bible, and then you want to be able to hear clearly. So let's see some examples. Who's talking to God in the Bible? What did he say? What were they doing leading up to God talking to them? And then one of the things I told the guy was pray for mercy. I explained to him that the name was the authority and title given. So you're representing, you know, the Creator. Kind of like when the cops pull you over or whatever else like that, you know. So got that through to him and everything. And I was like, dude, you need a crash course in do right, in Bible study. Like, you know, you got an airplane flying all the way to Africa. Like, don't sleep, dude. You need to be cramming for finals. You know what I mean? And man, you know, with the way things are going with CDLs and stuff like that, the chances of this dude coming back and there being a job waiting for him, you know, he's probably got a truck sitting right there that when he gets back, he ain't gonna be able to drive it. You know what I mean? If they cancel all the non-domicile CDLs, you know. Anyway, pray for mercy, man. Just pray for mercy. All right, Raquel, go get him.